been bowling lately? Well, you'll be glad to know that you've done nothing illegal. Yeah, I know. There's this myth going around the internet that somehow bowling is on the books as illegal everywhere in the United States, and it isn't. But I'll tell you what was illegal, well, prohibited, related to bowling in a lot of places in the 19th century in the United States, because that'll help clear up the problem, and you can bowl with a clear conscience. I'm John Paulus. You're listening to Life's Potluck Buffet, only on YouTube. If you're enjoying Life's Potluck Buffet, then please subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, thank you for your support. And if you're looking for another way to support Life's Potluck Buffet, you can contribute basic attention tokens through your Brave browser to Life's Potluck Buffet with John Paulus on YouTube. Thank you, and thank you for listening. So here's the myth that I've read in too many places on the internet. It's that 10-pin bowling, which is very common in the United States, if you're in the U.S. and you think of a bowling alley, that's what you're doing. You're doing 10-pin bowling. You've got the large urethane or, ball with the 3 holes in it, and the 60-foot long alley that you throw the ball down, the gutters on the side, and then there's 10 pins set up at the end of it, and that's 10-pin bowling. There's the myth ascribes that to the outlaw of 9-pin bowling earlier in the 19th century. That people were like, haha, well, we'll just add a pin and do 10-pin bowling, and that will be legal. That's not true. First, 10-pin bowling existed long before these ordinances, and these ordinances, which didn't have anything to do with outlawing bowling per se, were also almost always seem to have covered any number of pin bowling, 9 or more or less. It didn't matter how many pins. So there's really not much going for the idea that 10-pin bowling was somehow invented or popularized because of the outlaw of 9-pin bowling, because the laws that we're talking about applied to all pin types of bowling. So where did bowling come from? Well, it's been around since apparently time immemorial in lots of places. There have been mentions of bowling literally in places around the world from ancient times, using a ball and some things that you've set up to knock them down or things like that. So let's not look for too clear of a invention of bowling, because it's people. You give people a chance, and bowling's going to happen eventually, apparently. So we won't worry about that invention. There are 2 different kinds of types of bowling that are applicable here, though. There's the bowling with pin, where you knock down pins, and there's the kind of bowling that is usually called lawn bowling and related to all of those games that where you have a pin that is actually a round, small ball that is the target for your larger bowling balls that you then, there's a point system about being close to the actual, what is called a pin in English, but it's not a pin like the pins in 10-pin bowling. It's a round, usually now metal ball. So that's lawn bowling. That was also important in the United States and also is important around the world. The type of bowling talked about in these myths about 9-pin and 10-pin are bowling with pins, and these pins are now, well, coated in plastic, and they're white with red stripes around them. And there are still 3 types of pin bowling that are common. One is called candle pin, where it's a stick that is kind of tall and thin and candle shaped, and that there's a small ball that you throw at down, underhand down an alley to knock over the candle pins. And there's duck pin, which is a version of the bowling pin, the larger kind of more hourglass shaped pin, that is, it's just a smaller version of it, and the ball that's used for that is a little bit bigger than the candle pin ball, but it's not. It doesn't have holes in it like the 10-pin ball. The 10-pin kind of standard bowling alley setup around the U.S., although candlepin and duckpin are common in many places. The kind of one associated with professional bowling, the large kind of sport of bowling, which sadly has actually been in decline since the mid 1990s in the U.S. You can see that there are charts out there about the decline in bowling alleys and number of bowlers in the U.S. And the 10-pin bowling, as I said, the ball is much larger than the candle pin or the duck pin, or certainly the one for lawn bowling, and it has 3 holes in it, and it's usually pretty heavy, and you throw it down the alley, and there's a better chance of a strike, which means you knock all the 10 pins down at once, if you make the ball spin, and it's called a hook, because the angle that it enters into what is called the pocket, which is the space between the first pin and the head pin and the ones next to it, the space there, entering that with a hook enables you to more easily, and the science has proven this, more easily knock down all the pins. So, well, that's a little bit about 10-pin bowling. Now, the laws that were outlawing, supposedly outlawing bowling, were not at all outlawing bowling. What they were aimed at, and we have these on, we have the actual laws on the books from various places around the United States. What they were aimed at were outlawing the gambling that was going on during bowling games. And this was a very common gambling sport. And these were really kind of laws that were morality laws that were trying to decrease what was seen as the vice of gambling, and was also seen as related vices that were connected to gambling. And the laws all really stipulate that the bowling alley proprietor, or the proprietor of a bar or a tavern or any other place that has a bowling alley connected to it, which that was very common, who is found to have people gambling on the premises is going to be fined, and if they're convicted, then they're going to lose their license to have their bar or tavern, etc. That's the kind of overview of the laws regarding bowling. They weren't actually legislating the end of bowling or the change in bowling from 9 pins to 10 pins, because, as I said, the laws would say things like bowling with any number of pins, 9 or otherwise, that kind of thing. But what they were doing, they were trying to shift the activity of bowling from a gambling activity to one, and some of the laws are very specific about this, to one involving health and recreation. So that if it was shown that the bowling done at your establishment was purely for health and recreation, then it, in fact, was perfectly fine. In fact, it was encouraged. So in a certain way, these laws are really just vice laws. They're laws against gambling. They're not laws legislating anything about the sport of bowling or even casting judgment on it, because the point was that bowling is perfectly wonderful as a health and recreation sport, but it's not for gambling. And that's what that is. So when you see these kind of stories about curious historical facts that say, did you know bowling is illegal in the whole of the United States or something like that, know that those claims grew out of the mythology that somehow, and you see this also in the 19th century, the articles and papers that say, like a paper in Indiana, for example, in Indianapolis, will say, in Baltimore, they had a law outlawing 9-pin bowling. So people just started bowling with 10 pins. That's what people do, that kind of thing. These are all myths, and they're all stories that have to do with the prohibition on gambling connected with bowling and not with the sport of bowling. And they're kind of a group of mythological stories that kind of grew around this idea that it was bowling that was dangerous, not the gambling that went on during bowling and many other recreational activities, which are also in a lot of these laws, mentioned as activities where a lot of gambling goes on, and therefore gambling connected to those activities is prohibited. And the way it's prohibited is not by preventing people from doing those activities, but by fining and then canceling the license of proprietors who are connected with the establishments where bowling alleys are. I'll bet the Cards, the Cards have something to say today, so let's ask them for their advice about our life and recreation. Yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles. Cards, tell us some things. All right, here we go. Oop, it's card number 5. Translation is your enemy. Consider when transitioning to a new field of work that one type of work cannot sensibly translate into another. So when it comes to any job field, learn how to get and show experience rather than learning how to talk about your transferable skills. That's always going to give you a leg up. And so think about that. Think about work experiences that you have had and how you've started them. And when you started them, your previous skills weren't directly translatable into the new job skills, but you learned the new job skills and you were ready to do that. And that's what made you good at that job. So think about that today, and I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet.